When was the last time you were completely unavailable? Not just busy, not just distracted by your own life. Completely, deliberately, intentionally unavailable to the noise, the opinions, the expectations, and the performance demands of everyone around you. When was the last time you disappeared? For most people, the honest answer is never. They have been continuously available their entire adult lives. Available to their phone, available to social media, available to the expectations of family, friends, colleagues, and the invisible audience they carry in their heads everywhere they go. Available to the constant low-grade performance of being a person in the world. Showing up the way they are expected to show up. Saying the things they are expected to say. Being the version of themselves that the world around them has decided they should be. And they have not questioned this, because being available feels like being responsible. Being present feels like being good. Being reachable, visible, engaged with the world around you feels like participation, like mattering, like being alive in the right way. But I want to suggest something different. Something that most people will resist when they first hear it, because it goes against almost everything they have been taught about how a successful, responsible, engaged human being is supposed to operate. I want to suggest that the most powerful thing you could do with the next 6 months of your life is disappear. Not permanently, not irresponsibly, not in a way that abandons the people and obligations that genuinely depend on you, but deliberately, intentionally, with a clarity of purpose that most people never bring to any period of their lives. 6 months of going quiet. 6 months of redirecting the energy you currently spend performing your life toward actually building it. 6 months of the kind of deep, focused internal work that is simply not possible while the world has unlimited access to your attention. 6 months that could change everything about who you are, what you have built, and the version of yourself that emerges on the other side. This is what I want to talk to you about today, not as an abstract concept, not as a romantic idea about solitude and self-discovery, as a practical, specific, implementable decision that is available to you right now in 2026, regardless of your circumstances, regardless of your current situation, regardless of how deep in the noise you currently are. The disappearance is possible, the transformation is real, and the next 6 months are the window. Now, I want to be very specific about what disappearing actually means, because I think the word triggers 2 different misunderstandings that I want to address directly before we go further. The first misunderstanding is that disappearing means abandoning your responsibilities, dropping everything, running away from your life in search of some idealized version of yourself that doesn't have to deal with the mundane complexity of actual human existence. That is not what this is. Your responsibilities remain, your obligations remain, the people who depend on you remain. Disappearing does not mean removing yourself from the physical requirements of your life. It means removing yourself from the performance layer of your life, the layer that exists not because it serves any genuine function, but because it satisfies other people's expectations of your availability, your visibility, your consistent presence in the social ecosystem that you have been participating in. The second misunderstanding is that disappearing means doing nothing, retreating into passivity, stepping back from engagement and coasting for 6 months in a kind of pleasant inertia. That is also not what this is. In fact, it's almost the opposite. The disappearance I'm describing is not a retreat from effort, it's a radical redirection of effort. From the effort of maintaining your social presence, managing your image, responding to the world's demands on your attention, toward actually building something real, developing something deep, becoming something more than what you currently are. The person who disappears in the way I'm describing works harder during those 6 months than they have worked in years, but they work on the right things, the things that actually matter. The things that the noise of constant availability has been preventing them from getting to. Disappearing is not rest, it's focus, the most intense, most protected, most productive focus that most people have ever experienced. So what does this actually look like? What are the practical, daily, lived elements of a 6-month disappearance in 2026? It starts with social media, the most obvious and necessary element. Not necessarily permanent deletion, though for some people that is exactly what is needed, but a complete, non-negotiable withdrawal from the performance layer of social media. No posting, no stories, no updates about what you're doing or building or thinking or feeling, no broadcasting your journey, no seeking validation from the audience that has been quietly shaping your behavior in ways you may not have even noticed.
Because here is what social media actually does to a person who is trying to grow. It creates a continuous feedback loop between your actions and other people's reactions. You do something, you post it, you get a response. And that response, the likes, the comments, the engagement, becomes part of the motivation system. The reason for doing the thing begins to include the posting of the thing. The doing becomes intertwined with the performing of the doing. And this is extraordinarily destructive to genuine development, because genuine development does not need an audience. It needs time. It needs repetition. It needs the freedom to be bad at something while you are learning it without that badness being visible to anyone. It needs the freedom to experiment without every experiment being evaluated by people who do not understand the process. When you remove the audience, you remove the performance. And when you remove the performance, the work becomes about the work, not about how the work will look to other people, not about the version of the work worth posting, about the actual substance of what you are building and who you are becoming. 6 months without the performance layer of social media, not to punish yourself, to free yourself. The second element of the disappearance is the radical reduction of availability, the constant checking of messages, the immediate responses to every notification, the always-on, always reachable, always one-tap-away presence that modern communication has made the default mode of human existence. This is not about being rude. It is not about becoming unresponsive to the people who genuinely matter to you. It is about distinguishing between the people and communications that deserve your genuine, unhurried attention and the endless stream of low-priority noise that has been filling the space where your best thinking could be happening. Most of the messages that arrive in your phone or your email on any given day do not require an immediate response. They feel urgent because they are new and because the technology is designed to create the sensation of urgency. But urgency is not importance, and the person who responds to everything immediately is not more capable or more responsible than the person who batches their responses and protects extended periods of uninterrupted time. They are just more controlled by the tool that is supposed to serve them. During the 6 months of disappearance, you check your messages at designated times, not constantly, not every 20 minutes. At times you decide in advance that serve your schedule rather than everyone else's. And in the spaces between those designated times, your attention belongs entirely to the work. The third element is what you fill the silence with, because a disappearance is only as valuable as what happens inside it. Silence and solitude without direction are not transformative. They are just empty, and empty does not build anything. The silence needs to be filled with the specific, intentional, daily work of building the version of yourself that the noise has been preventing you from becoming. And that means getting honest, perhaps more honest than you have been willing to be, about what that version actually looks like. What are the skills that, if developed over 6 months of daily practice, would change your professional trajectory? What is the knowledge that, if genuinely acquired, rather than superficially consumed, would change the quality of your decisions? What are the health habits, financial behaviors, creative practices, or relational skills that you have been meaning to build for years, while the noise has been providing convenient cover for not building them? The disappearance forces the question, because when the noise is gone and the performance layer is removed and the distraction is no longer available, the question that remains, the one you have been avoiding by staying busy, is, what am I actually doing with my life, and is it what I actually want? That question deserves an honest answer, and the 6 months of disappearance is where you find it.
Now I want to talk about the inner transformation that happens during a deliberate disappearance, the psychological, emotional, deeply personal dimension of what occurs when a person removes themselves from the performance layer of their life and spends extended time in genuine contact with themselves. Because this is where the real change happens, not in the skills built, or the projects completed, or the habits developed, though all of those matter, in the relationship between you and yourself. Most people have a complicated relationship with themselves, not in the dramatic sense, in the quiet, constant, barely noticed sense of never quite being comfortable in their own company, of needing the noise, the stimulation, the distraction, not just for entertainment, but as a buffer, a way of not being too alone with their own thoughts and feelings and the things they know about themselves that they would prefer not to examine too closely. And the noise serves this function very well. As long as there is always something to look at, something to scroll through, something to respond to, the examination can be indefinitely postponed. The questions can remain unasked. The knowledge can remain just below the surface of consciousness, present enough to create discomfort, but never quite clear enough to require action. The disappearance removes the buffer, and for the first weeks, this is genuinely uncomfortable. The things that have been waiting underneath the noise begin to surface. The clarity about what is not working, about what you have been avoiding, about the distance between the life you are living and the life you actually want, that clarity becomes unavoidable. Most people, when they encounter this clarity, reach immediately for the phone, for the distraction, for the comfortable re-immersion in the noise. And this is the critical moment of the disappearance, the moment where the choice is made to go back or to stay. Staying means sitting with the discomfort, letting the clarity develop, letting the things that have been waiting to be examined actually be examined. Not to punish yourself, not to wallow, but to actually understand yourself, your patterns, your values, your genuine desires, your real obstacles, the stories you have been telling yourself that may or may not be true, with the kind of depth and honesty that only extended, uninterrupted, buffer-free self-examination produces. And what comes out of that examination, what develops in the space after the initial discomfort has passed and the clarity has been allowed to land, is something that cannot be manufactured any other way. Self-knowledge. Real self-knowledge. The kind that changes how you make decisions, how you understand your own behavior, how you relate to failure and success and the people around you. The kind that makes the next version of your life genuinely different from the current one, rather than just more of the same with different scenery.
This is the gift inside the discomfort of the disappearance, and it is only available to the person who stays with the discomfort long enough for it to transform into something useful. Let me talk about what the 6 months actually produces. What is on the other side of the disappearance for the person who commits to it fully and follows through on that commitment for the entire 6 months? The first thing that is on the other side is capability. Real, developed, practiced capability in whatever areas you chose to invest the time in. Not the surface-level familiarity that comes from consuming content about a subject. The genuine capability that comes from months of daily practice, daily learning, daily application, and daily iteration. The difference between these two things is not subtle. The person who has read about writing for 6 months and the person who has written every day for 6 months are not equally capable. The person who has watched videos about business and the person who has been building a business every day are not in the same position. The person who has learned about fitness and the person who is trained consistently for 6 months are in different bodies. Capability is built through doing, daily doing. The 6 months of disappearance, directed towards specific daily practice in the areas that matter most to you, builds a level of real capability that simply is not possible while your time and attention are being continuously divided. The second thing on the other side is clarity. The kind of clarity about who you are, what you value, what you actually want from your life, and what you are willing to do to get it, that only comes from extended time in your own company, without the mediating presence of other people's opinions and expectations, and the social performance demands that shape behavior in ways you may not even be aware of. Most people do not know themselves as well as they think they do. They know the version of themselves that they present to the world. They know their preferences, their opinions, their surface-level desires. But the deeper knowing, the understanding of their actual values, their genuine motivations, the patterns that repeat in their behavior whether they choose them or not, that knowing requires the kind of sustained, honest, uninterrupted self-examination that the noise prevents. 6 months of disappearance builds that knowing. And knowing yourself, really knowing yourself, is the foundation of every meaningful decision you will make for the rest of your life. The third thing on the other side is momentum. Real, built, compounded momentum in the direction of the life you are trying to build. Because 6 months of daily, focused, undistracted effort in any significant direction does not just move you forward linearly. It compounds. Each day of work builds on the previous. Each week of practice adds to the accumulated capability. Each month of directed effort changes not just what you can do, but who you are. The person who emerges from 6 months of genuine disappearance and genuine work is not 6 months further along the same path. They are on a different path. A path that was not available before because they had not yet built what the disappearance produced. The clarity to see it, the capability to walk it, the identity to sustain it. The fourth thing on the other side is freedom. Not the shallow freedom of being able to do whatever you want in any given moment. The deep freedom of being someone who is genuinely self-directed, who knows what they are doing and why, who has built the internal resources, the knowledge, the skills, the self-understanding, the discipline to navigate their own life without needing the external validation and constant guidance that most people depend on without realizing it. This freedom is earned. It is not given. It cannot be consumed or downloaded or acquired through watching someone else who has it. It is built through exactly the kind of extended, focused internal work that the 6 months of disappearance makes possible. And it is permanent, not in the sense that it requires no maintenance, but in the sense that once you have genuinely built something in yourself, once you have developed a real capability, a real clarity, a real self-knowledge, it does not disappear because you eventually return to the world. It is part of you. It comes with you, and it changes everything about how you operate in the world when you return. Now I want to address the objections, because there will be objections. There are always objections when an idea requires something genuinely significant from the person considering it. The first objection is, I cannot disappear. I have too many responsibilities, too many people who need me, too many obligations that cannot be set aside for 6 months. And I want to be honest with this objection rather than dismissive of it, because for some people, in some circumstances, the full version of what I'm describing is genuinely not possible right now. The obligations are real, the dependencies are real, the constraints are real. But I want to ask you something about this objection. When you say you cannot disappear, are you saying you cannot remove yourself from any aspect of the performance layer of your life? That not a single hour per day can be redirected from social performance and reactive availability towards focused internal work? That no element of the constant noise can be reduced even slightly? Because the 6 months I'm describing does not require moving to a monastery. It does not require being literally unreachable to everyone who matters. It requires a commitment to progressively, deliberately reducing the performance demands on your time and attention, and replacing them with the focused internal work of genuine development.
Even 30 minutes per day of genuine, protected, undistracted work on what matters most to you is 30 minutes per day more than most people are currently investing. Sustained over 6 months, that's 90 hours of focused work. 90 hours of genuine practice, genuine study, genuine self-examination. That is not nothing. That is a significant foundation for real change. Start with what is possible, and let what is possible expand as you demonstrate to yourself and the world around you that protecting this time is non-negotiable. The second objection is, people will notice I have disappeared, and they will think something is wrong or be offended or lose interest. And this objection reveals something important about the performance layer problem. The concern is not about the work. The concern is about other people's perceptions, about what the disappearance will look like to an audience that has been receiving your continuous presence and will now receive something different. But consider what this reveals. If the prospect of becoming less visible, less available, less continuously present on social media and in the peripheral communication channels of your social life creates genuine anxiety, if the imagined reaction of an audience to your reduced visibility is a significant obstacle to your own development, that is important information. It means the performance layer is not just a habit, it's a dependency, a need for the validation that visibility provides that is strong enough to compete with your own growth.
And that dependency is exactly what the disappearance is designed to address. The anxiety about what people will think when you go quiet is not a reason to stay loud. It is the most compelling reason to go quiet. Because the person who cannot tolerate reduced visibility without anxiety is a person whose sense of self is too dependent on external validation. And that dependency limits everything. Let them notice. Let them wonder. Let them move on to other content, other people, other sources of the stimulation you were providing. The people who matter, who are genuinely in relationship with you rather than just consuming your output, will understand. Or they will ask, and you can tell them honestly, I am working on something. I will be back. The third objection is 6 months is too long. I will lose momentum. I will lose relevance. I will fall behind while everyone else keeps moving. This objection is based on a misunderstanding of what momentum actually is and where relevance comes from. Real momentum is not maintained by continuous visibility. It is built through the accumulation of genuine capability and real results. The person who disappears for 6 months and emerges with substantially greater skill, clearer direction, and a more complete version of what they are building has not lost momentum. They have built it, quietly, in the space that others were filling with noise. And relevance, real relevance, the kind that lasts, does not come from never going quiet. It comes from having something genuinely worth saying when you speak, from building something worth noticing when you emerge, from the quality and substance of what you produce rather than the frequency of your presence. The person who is continuously present but producing nothing of depth is not more relevant than the person who disappears for 6 months and returns with something real. They are just louder, and loud is not the same as relevant. 6 months is not too long. 6 months is barely enough for the kind of transformation that actually matters. Now let me tell you about the person who comes back. Because eventually the 6 months ends. The disappearance is not permanent. The silence is not forever. At some point you return to the world, to visibility, to the engagement with other people and ideas and the full richness of human life. That is, ultimately, what makes the internal work worth doing. But the person who returns is not the person who left. They carry themselves differently, not with arrogance. Arrogance is the performance of confidence for an audience, with the quiet, grounded, unperformative certainty of someone who knows what they have built and why and what it is worth. They speak differently, with more precision, more substance,
less need to fill the silence with words that do not mean anything, because they have spent 6 months in genuine contact with their own thinking, and that contact produces clarity of expression that continuous performance never does. They make decisions differently, with more alignment between their choices and their actual values, with less influence from the opinions of people who do not know them well enough to have a meaningful opinion, with the kind of self-trust that only develops through the extended experience of being alone with your own judgment and discovering that the judgment is sound. They work differently, with more focus, more patience with the long timelines that meaningful work requires, less need for the immediate validation that used to make the absence of early results feel like evidence of failure, because they have spent 6 months building in silence, and they have experienced, firsthand, through their own embodied practice, that the results come later than the work, and that the gap between the work and the results is not a sign that the work is not working, it is just the gap. They are different, in ways that are not immediately visible to everyone, but that are felt by the people who know them, by the people who engage with their work, by the opportunities that begin to arrive in response to the substance of what they have built, rather than the volume of what they have been posting. This is who comes back from the 6 months. Not a perfect version, not an arrived version, but a more real version. A version that has been stripped of some of the performance, some of the external dependence, some of the anxiety about visibility and validation that was quietly shaping everything before. A version that is more themselves. And that version, that more genuine, more capable, more self-directed version, changes everything about what comes next. Not because the world is suddenly different, because the person navigating it is. So here is where I leave you, and I want to be direct because I think directness is more respectful than the gentle encouragement that softens the edges of what this actually requires. The 6 months of disappearance in 2026 is available to you. The window is open. The time exists, not in some idealized, perfectly arranged future version of your life, but right now, in the actual, messy, complicated version of your life that you are currently living. The time exists because you will spend the next 6 months doing something with it regardless. The question is only what. You will spend the next 6 months performing or building, maintaining your visibility or developing your capability, responding to the world's demands on your attention or directing your attention toward what actually matters, being shaped by the noise or shaping yourself in the silence. Both paths take the same 6 months, only one of them produces something real at the end. I am not going to tell you it will be easy. The first weeks will be uncomfortable in ways you did not fully anticipate. The silence will be louder than you expected. The things that surface when the buffer of noise is removed will require more courage to face than the noise has been allowing you to believe. But on the other side of that discomfort is something worth every uncomfortable moment of the getting there. A version of yourself that is more capable, more clear, more genuinely free than the one that has been managing its performance and maintaining its visibility and waiting for the right moment to actually build the life it has been imagining. That moment is not coming from the outside. It is not going to arrive as a sign or a circumstance or a perfectly aligned set of conditions. It is going to be created by you in the silence over 6 months, one day at a time. Disappear, do the work, build something real, and when you come back with something worth returning for. The next 6 months of 2026 are yours. Use them.